Welcome to Unlocking Moves, where we're going to cover the key decision points and pivotal moments that really change the trajectory of successful entrepreneurs and leaders. We want to share stories, not just the glory stories, but also the gory stories. Because as I like to say, the bigger the shit show, the bigger the lesson. Speaking of shit shows, my guest today is Mathias Ihlenfeld. I'll let that hang for a second. In all seriousness, my guest today is Mathias Ihlenfeld, who is co-CEO of Woom, which is an amazing company that spends, I think, most of its lifetime on the Inc. 5000. But Mathias, I want to start with, you started your career, most of your career in consulting, as a management consulting with IBM and then SAP. How the hell does that translate to running a children's bike company?
Well, that's certainly one of the big moves that I had. Is to be able to pivot and move into a new career. I was fairly successful in doing my consulting work. A lot of SAP work, and I was working with clients to support them with their solutions. And it was just pure luck and being at the right place at the right time.
Awesome. As you see, my guest today is Mathias Ihlenfeld, who's not only a good friend, he is co-CEO of Woom, which, as I said, is a very fast-growing children's bike company now in the U.S. He brought the concept over from Germany when his brother and co-founder started the company. He started his career, as I mentioned, with IBM and SAP Consulting, among others. He played college tennis. He emanated to the U.S. We're going to have lots we're going to dig into today. Mathias, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much, Kurt. I'm really excited to be part of the show and talk to you about the learnings and the growings. And you and I both are lifelong learners. So I'm looking forward to a really fun chat with you today.
If you're just joining us on Unlocking Moves, today's episode is brought to you as usual by HireBetter, the strategic talent partner for growth-minded entrepreneurs everywhere. Well, here's what I meant to say. I meant to say, Willkommen in Unlocking Moves. Wie geht's?
Geht's sehr gut, Kurt. Wie geht's dir heute?
That's about all the German I know. I had a German exchange student for a year, and I spent 4 semesters in college learning German. I think that's all I retained, by the way.
That's okay. That's okay. After spending almost 30 years in the US, it's kind of funny. Sometimes I have to do podcasts. So I'm doing podcasts or investor meetings in Europe, obviously in Vienna, and then I'm talking in German, and then it's coming over as Denglish. They call it the Denglish. So it's like this German English version of Mathias. So I for sure be quite happy to talk with you in English today, Kurt.
Well, you probably can't make anybody happy. Either you have too much of a German accent for people like me, or you have too much of an English accent for people back home.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Mathias, I want to dive into the Woom story because it is such an amazing story. Can you give us your 2-minute overview of how it came about and really what got you here?
Yeah, I think you talked about it a little bit earlier about my consulting path and career. I've been doing SAP and IBM consulting, and I started my own consulting practice also. I called it Ihlenfeld Consulting. So I'd been doing that for 3 years, and I was just lucky, like I said, in 2013, my brother Marcus and his partner Christian Betzdecker started Woom in a small garage in Vienna. And one of the first bikes that they built by hand in their garage, they sent it over to me as a birthday present for my son Luca. And as soon as I saw the bike in 2013, I knew it was going to be something special. And funny enough, my son started riding around the neighborhood, and my neighbor saw the bike, and he saw how much fun Luca had on the bike. And he said, my daughter Millie, she probably would love to ride a bike like that as well. And I said, okay. He said, where can I get one? And I said, let me make a phone call. So I called my brother Marcus, said, hey, can you build one more bike, for me, send it over. He sent it over to me, and I sold my first bike to my neighbor. And I thought that was going to be a good start. And that was kind of the start. My wheels started spinning. And I was like, I can do this consulting gig during the day, and I can start working on this Woom project at night and over the weekends, and talk with my brother. And 2014, I founded Woom. And that's how it kind of all started. But certainly it looked a lot easier than it actually was.
Well, I know at some point you had to give up your consulting career. So I know that was a big move I want to talk about. But let me step back to what you were talking about with the bike. I've ridden a lot of bikes. I grew up riding bikes. I love to ride a bike. But what makes your bike so freaking special that your neighbors say, I've got to have one?
Well, first of all, we have a very strong design focus. So we design bikes specifically for children to be successful. So it's ergonomically designed and it's extremely beautiful. But not only that, it's also extremely lightweight, and it has all the features that the child needs to be successful. So we spend a lot of time in refining and defining that bike. And really, our customers say we don't sell bikes, we sell smiles. And when children get on our bikes, we guarantee them success. So that's a little bit different than what was on the market, because what was on the market was adult bikes. Basically, they were shrunken down to kids' bikes, and they were heavy, clunky, and they didn't do the job. So we revolutionized the kids' bike, and our success shows and proves that we're on the right path.
You guys have done such an incredible job. Let me touch on that for a second. As I recall, the first iteration or the new bike rider, it doesn't have pedals. And then as I recall, you have a trade up program. So as my child grows, I can trade in my bike. That's all very cool stuff. Talk to me a little bit about that.
That's right. So we have bike models that start as early as a child for 18 months, 2 years old. So they get on a bike, which is called a balance bike. Some call it push bike. So they learn how to basically balance. And we also install a little brake so that 18 months, 2-year-old learns how to balance the bike and also learns how to brake. And those are really critical components in riding a bike. And then as they grow up, they have to also learn how to pedal. So you put those skills together, and we offer a bike lineup that reaches all the way to the early teens. So a full lineup of bikes. And we revolutionized also the industry by offering what's called an upcycling program. So it allows you to trade in that bike and will give you credit toward the purchase of the next bigger bike. And the reason we can do that is because we offer a really quality product. We know that the bike that you're using, we are getting back from you, and we can basically refurbish and either resell or donate to a good cause. And that basically revolutionized the industry, because no one has ever done it before. And it speaks for the value and the durability and sustainability of our bikes.
That is so cool. Mathias, what I just heard was German engineering for your bicycle, which is first class for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when I first started this in the US, that was obviously a big factor for me. I was like, well, I have a great brand and I have great products. But there were a lot of naysayers at first that said, well, is this going to work? Are people going to pay a little bit more money for the quality? And at first there were a lot of doubters because the bike is a little bit more expensive. But when you start looking at the value proposition of it and the resale value of the bike, it started, the lights came on for customers. But at first there were a lot of people that said this isn't going to work in the US.
So one of the things I want to do with this show, Mathias, is to inspire other entrepreneurs to fight through those naysayers and those doubts. Talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, you've got your brother and his co-founder had an idea. You brought it to the US. People said it would never work in the US. It's too expensive. You said, screw you, we're going to make it work. Talk to me about those early years.
Yes. And then I started this in 2014 and I sold 13 bikes.
Hey, that's 13 times what you sold the first day.
13 bikes. Those were the hardest bikes I would ever sell to anybody. And it goes to show that just because you have a great brand, because the brand is beautiful, the products are the best in the market, that just doesn't automatically guarantee success. So it was a pretty rude awakening for me because I was like, wow, with 13 bikes, I'm not going to make this work. So I really had to dig deep and come up with really creative ways of marketing the product to our customers. And, funny enough, one of my strengths after, looking through, taking tests and learning about yourself is ideation. So I had this in the Clifton Strengths Finder, my number one strength is ideation. And now it makes sense because I had to come up with some creative ideas and solutions to this problem, which is I have the best product on the market, but nobody knows about it. So how can I make my target market, which obviously are families with kids between 18 months and 12 years old, how can I, A, make them aware that we have the best product? And then B, how can I build trust with our customers that you are going to put your child on our product? And then C, which is the one of the bigger ones, is how do I make sure that you trust me to, or that you are able to buy this on the internet? Because back in the days, we only sold this product over our e-com web shop. And so you had to buy something without having seen and touched it, and spend quite a good amount of money on it. So those were some serious challenges, and I ended up figuring it out. But for sure, those were rude awakenings early on, for sure.
Well, you can't leave me hanging on that. You're going to have to tell me what the 2 or 3 things you did to figure it out. And it might be related to what one of my follow-up questions was going to be. You guys do so much in the community for families and for kids, especially around the bicycling community. Are those related in any way?
Yeah, for sure. For me, it's actually a big part of my personal value proposition. I want to also give back to the community. We obviously donate a lot of bikes, those upcycled bikes. We donate them to children, that otherwise wouldn't be able to ride bikes. But early on, that was certainly something that was a big aspect for me, is how do I get these bikes in front of families and children. So I did a lot of that grassroots event or events in the local communities. I bought a tent. I had a little minivan, and I had a table, and I had some whatever you have for these events. And I would go out to Zilker Park. I would go to Mueller, all around these areas, and I would go do events. And and back in the days, it was like I was working during the week. I was traveling during the week for my consulting job, and then on the weekends, I packed up my van with the bikes and the tent, and I would go out and present the bikes to families, because I needed to get them in front of folks. And one of the things is, like, I always wanted to be at the Mueller's Farmers Market. I don't know if you know the Mueller Farmers Market. It's this artisan farmers market over at Mueller, which is obviously it's a great neighborhood for families. And I'd been working for several months to get there. And because we are like a bike brand, and we don't do we manufacture we assemble the bikes locally in Austin, and we have our headquarters here, but we don't sell organic vegetables and all those things. Anyway, so I finally get to go to Mueller through a connection, and the weather was not ideal. It was 35 degrees on that Saturday, and there was one child riding the bike, and that was Luca. He was the only one showing up to actually experience and be part of the program. So, in all seriousness, events was definitely a big one. It's a heavy lift, because you have to basically do it all on your own, and you never know who turns up and who shows up, and so but it's certainly something that was important to me. Building relationships and being part of other organizations, I think, has also been very important. And then I think the biggest thing for me was to reach out to, I was asking myself, how do I create trust with the consumer? And I can say whatever I want about the product, that doesn't make it trustworthy. So I needed to find some social proof, right? So that was 2 ways to find social proof. One is I would be leveraging my existing customer, right? So those 13 customers I already had sold bikes to in 2014, I would try to get them on board and say, can you please help me and share that success with other parents? So that was one thing. And then the second thing was independent reviewers, right? And back in the days, believe it or not, there were people, parents, most of them, that were reviewing products for children. And so I was spending quite a bit of time, working with them and showing how sending them the sample products. They would test it, and then they would write up that we were the best product on the market. And that's certainly, those 2 things were certainly the early solutions to that problem.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Mathias. Here's what I heard with what you just said. Number one is get out there yourself and interact with customers and be the feet on the street. Don't hire an intern to go sell bikes at the freaking farmer's market in the early days. Do it yourself. You want to get the feedback, and you inspire your customers to want to support you in your new business, I'm sure, and then continue to iterate and be an advocate for your consumer. Thanks for sharing. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, well, I think one other aspect that goes along with the customers is, offering the customer experience that the customer deserves, right? I think that was number one early on for me. Very important is be there for your customer, and that's what I did early on. Is the customer is the king, as we always say, and that's still true until today. It's the customer is really the one that matters. It's the parent, but more importantly, it's the child using our products.
It's amazing how many entrepreneurs have a great product or service and they want to sell it to somebody instead of really having a customer or client really want their product or service. So focusing on customers, that's awesome. Hey, Mathias, I'm going to take a gratuitous product placement break here for a second and grab a water. Here we go. Hey, by the way, while we're doing this, is it woombikes.com or woom.com?
It's now woom.com. Yeah, WOOM.com.
All right. Yeah, go check it out. It's an amazing site, guys. So, Mathias, well, first of all, let's settle something right now because I have to have this conversation whenever I bring up your name. Mathias or Mathias? I tell them it's freaking Mathias, and I'll punch them if they say anything else. Is that right?
1994 to make sure that people say my name right. But I've been called a lot worse, obviously, throughout the years. But Mathias is, I'll take that. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So, Mathias, I consider myself the listener's advocate. If I'm going to listen or watch the show and I see this German guy who's built an amazing company in the US with a management consulting background, what would I want to know about him? And I've got to learn about that story from being a German kid to coming to the US. It sounds like you came here to play tennis and you decided to stay, and now you've become just an amazing entrepreneur in the US. Tell me a little bit about that journey. Why, how, the challenges, what have you?
Yeah, I think it's certainly resonates very well with me right now because I'm revisiting my past a little bit and see how I actually got here, in 2023. In 1994, I left Germany with a toothbrush and 2 tennis rackets, and I came to a different country. And my goal was to get a degree, go to university, and brush up on my English, and then go back to Germany to get a job there. I never intended to stay in the US. And one thing led to another. I got my master's degree, my graduate degree. I got an MBA because that was something that I thought would prepare me better to go back to Europe. And doing my graduate degree, I was doing well, and they needed some help with a local business in Birmingham to help them work with the system. And so I was doing some graduate assistant work, 20 hours a week to support me with my studies. And I was trying to do the best I can for them, and they offered a job for me after graduation. So I in 1999 I ended up accepting a job, and I moved to Birmingham, Alabama, and that was the start of my SAP systems career. And I the one thing I always say is, like, I never had the intent or the objective to become a CEO of a business or to start a business. That was never really my intent. I mean, early on, I didn't even know what I was going to do, Kurt. It was one of those things where I think it's okay to be a teenager and even in the early 20s and not knowing what you want to do, because back then I had no idea what I wanted to do, what I was good at, what are my superpowers. I had no idea. So, whether that's right or wrong, I was kind of going with the flow, accepting the job. But the one thing I always tried to do the best that I could. And so whether that was undergraduate, whether that was graduate school, or whether that's my first job, I remember the CEO, his name was Red Fifield, and he was an old school guy, and he wanted us to show up to work at 6:30 a.m. And so we started at 6:30 a.m. And you know how systems implementations are. Sometimes you have to work late. And then we worked from 6:30 until 8, 9 p.m. pretty much every day. And then we had the weekend. Okay, we had the weekend to relax a little bit. But it was one of those days where, it was just like, I'm going to do the best I can. And when I did the best that I could, I was being presented opportunities. So then I was recruited by another company to work with them on an SAP implementation. And then IBM recruited me. I became part of the global business consulting practice. But throughout those 16 years of consulting, the customer was always at the top of mind for me. And I was always doing what I could to present the best option and the best solution for my customers. There was no doubt around it. And I'm still trying to figure out where that comes from, where that motivation comes from. I think it's probably my upbringing, but that's something that's near and dear to my heart. And I think when you work hard and when you do the best that you can, then opportunities will be presented to me. In the last 20 years, whatever, I've talked to my brother about this the other day. I've never asked anybody for a pay increase. It never dawned on me. I was just like, people are going to pay me for what they believe what I'm worth or what the value is that I can bring to them. And that was always what I wanted to do, is I want to serve my customers, whether that was consulting or whether that was now at Woom.
And I hope the youth of America and Germany are listening to what you just said right now. The work ethic, but really, I want to come back to what you said about not really knowing what you wanted to do, but just going and doing the best you could. And there's so many universities in the U.S. now that are asking you to declare a major when you're 17 years old. They're asking you, what do you want to do? I'm 52 years old or whatever I am, maybe 54 now, and I still don't know what I want to do, Mathias. So that's an inspiration for me. I hope it is for kids. There is one other thing that you touched on, or I want to come back to you on this story. Can you, first of all, big or small, was your town that you grew up in Germany, was it large or small?
It was a super small town. It was about 3,000 people in that small town. Yeah.
Okay. So it wasn't a culture shock when you moved to Monroe, Louisiana with the toothbrush and 2 tennis rackets.
It was a huge culture shock. I mean, I remember it as if it was yesterday. I mean, obviously, I barely spoke any English. My English was not very good. And then, of course, you're Monroe, Louisiana, and I remember when I ordered breakfast in the mornings, and you order it at in the cafeteria. It was always a gamble because I was always saying yes, and I didn't know what they were saying, because I didn't understand the dialect and the accent. So it was a huge culture shock, but I think it was one of the best moves I made in my life, pretty much, because I moved into a completely different culture. I had to assimilate, and I had to make it work, and I had to also, but it was also fun. Looking back, it was a fun experience to go somewhere not knowing hardly anybody and trying to make it work when you're 19 years old.
That's awesome. That should be an inspiration to folks. So really quick backstory, or really quick story. My sister-in-law is a Kiwi. So she moved from New Zealand to the US, similar to you coming in as a foreign exchange student or as a new US student. And she grew up in a beach town. And so she looked at the map of the US and she wanted to go to a place that was near the ocean. And so the college placement people placed her in Lake Charles, Louisiana. So not far from Monroe where you are. It is close to, quote, the water, but there's no freaking beach. It's if you're familiar with South Louisiana, it's freaking swamp. So I thought that was a funny story.
I thought you were going to say Port Aransas or Galveston or something like that. So
that would be exotic compared to Lake Charles. That's for sure. Yeah. Hey, let me shift gears. I see amazing product placement in the view with Who's Your Mike back there. As you know, wrote a book about the employees you'll meet on your entrepreneurial journey. I want to dig into that a bit with some of the characters or legacy employees that you've outgrown. And there's a few other like silver bullets that don't work out that you hire from the outside. I'd love your favorite character from Who's Your Mike. And maybe if you could tell me about your Mike, if you don't mind.
Yeah, back in my consulting career, I had plenty of techno Tims, but I think Who's who's, Mike is for sure the big character at Woom. And it's funny because I had my Mike or Mike's and my brother, I just, talked to him about this because it's related to organizational evolution, right? You're going from a startup and you're growing, you have different phases and you have different players, participate in those different phases. And he has had his mics and I did have my mics as well. And then I think though, what's really also important to recognize is I wouldn't have been able to get to where I am today without my mic or without my mics, And I think that's always very important to recognize is that this is not something you can do on your own. You need passionate, dedicated, even friends. You early on you create also these friendships because you're working so intimately with your team members, and that's why the concept of Mike is also a very valuable one for everybody, because these most likely are your friends, and you eventually have to move on from your friends, and those are the most difficult decisions you can make, is because they also helped you with where you want to get to, for sure. So that's definitely a big one. Yeah.
Definitely a challenging conversation to have somebody who is so loyal to you and get you where you are. And the reality is who got you here may not be the right person or team to get you there. And just a tough concept, but doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that you may have outgrown them. So thank you for sharing.
The thing is, I think I also have to be very, I wouldn't say I would try to be self-aware and understand myself as well. I mean, I don't want to be the Mike myself, I'm investing a lot in learning and growing and all that, but I also have to, I don't want to become my own Mike, so to speak, because, you don't want to hold the organization back, because you need to have the right people at the right time in the organization as well.
Well, I think at all times at some time, we all become our own mics. And it doesn't mean we can't grow through it or we can't surround ourselves with stronger people than us so we can continue to grow. But we're going to have to face that reality at some point, unless you're, I guess, the rare Michael Dell who grew all the way from startup, in his garage to a multi-billion-dollar company. But he's had a lot of smart people around him, so he's been able to grow through it.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to touch on something that I love about what you've done at Woom. And there's a chapter in the book called HR Roto, which is about the compliance side of HR and what most entrepreneurs hate about HR. And then there's the strategic, best places to work, great, talent acquisition, whatever side of HR. You have decided to take the HR concept and you created a employee experience department. Tell me about that, man. I love that concept.
Yeah.
And by the way, in the book for this very concept. So let's talk about it.
And we talked and I was just rambling on. And then you said, well, can I use that as a quote in my book? And I was like, yeah, I don't even remember what I said, but sure, go ahead, do that. No, I think to me, it's actually, for me, it's a very important concept because, we are ultimately, we can only be successful when we take care of our employees, and we want to make sure that we offer the best possible experience for our employees. Similarly, as we want to offer the best experience for our customers. And so both of those, it's kind of a triangle relationship. It's Woom, employees, and customers. And the underlying belief that we have is that if and when we take care of our employees and we offer them the best possible experience, then naturally we will have a high-performing team. But more importantly, we will automatically take care of our customers. And ultimately, customers is, those are the ones that purchase our products that allow us to be successful. So what we do is we really approach as early as the hiring process phase, through onboarding, integrating, trying to offer career opportunities within Woom, and also quite a bit of learning and development program to help our employees in advance and grow. Also asking for feedback, employee engagement surveys, but also until we roll off our employees, whether they leave on their own or whether they leave because we decide that, but supporting them afterwards. So it's the whole life cycle of our employees, and it's something that it's really near and dear to my heart. And I'm extremely grateful and lucky to have an amazing leader in April, who's also supporting and implementing that globally now. So I'm really, really proud of the team. Are we perfect yet? No, of course not. We have still a lot to learn. But for a 9-year or 10-year-old organization, I think we are doing what I want to do, and I think and hope that our team is also appreciative of it.
Mathias, I want you to know how you should be very proud of what you've built. You should be proud of what you're doing there, because that's not many people are doing what you just described as far as creating that experience for their employees. But your employees who are happy are going to make your customers happier, and that's just how it works. Keep your team and your employees motivated and happy.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the kind words.
So, Mathias, the name of the show is Unlocking Moves, where we really try to uncover the key decision or pivotal moment that really unlocked the success of entrepreneurs and leaders. I'd love to dig into what one or two might be for you. And we may have already talked about some of them, but let's go.
Yeah, I think the one that was always top of mind was in regard to how I was going to finance the business, right? And I think that's one of those things. It's a bootstrap business, which is highly capital intensive. So, when I started in 2014, I ordered the first 500 bikes, and then we were growing 300% year over year. At one point, we were on the Inc. 5000 that's growing 742%, in 2 years or so. And so the question always was, how do I bootstrap? How do I finance this business? And that's where it's gotten really, really tough for me, because I didn't want to invite any investors in external capital. So in 2017, which was 3 years after I started, I approached multiple external banks to help me fund the business. And I heard everything from, it was always the same. It's like, oh, we love Woom. You guys doing amazing things. You have the best product. Yes, come over. And yeah, we'd love to have you and present your findings. And then we were, I was presenting the financials, and then it's like, well, you don't meet this ratio, and you don't have enough profits, and you don't have enough equity and all that. So it was a very frustrating time. And I got one rejection after another. It was really, really challenging for me also mentally. And I remember there was one time where I had liquidated all of my 401ks, right? So my entire retirement accounts were liquidated. I maxed out all my credit cards. I had no more cash. I actually used to have a condo. I sold my condo, and I had no more money, and I wasn't sure how I was going to make payroll. And that my dishwasher in my house broke, and back then my wife was asking me, it's like, hey, and the dishwasher is broken, we need to get the dishwasher fixed. And I'm like, yeah, I know we need to get that fixed. And she's like, well, why can't we? And I'm like, we just can't. And she's like, well, we can just charge it on the credit card, right? And I said, no, they're all maxed out, right? And so
I'm waiting for this to turn positive. Is it going to turn positive?
Well, yeah, and so it was a big struggle at first, and that's when I knew I had to really, really dig deep and use my creativity again and do what I had to do. And I made some decisions to use some really crazy alternative financing tools. I used the PayPal credit facility that had an annual percentage rate of 30.10%. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
APR. I used that Amex financing. I used Shopify Capital financing. I used OnDeck financing, and so I was able to make it work because I knew that if and when I pay and get the bikes in, I knew I was going to sell them. So it was just a matter of time to get that done. And then I was working with John on really working on the financials. So I brought in John as a great CFO to help me really basically focus on all the financial ratios that I needed to get financing, and I was able to turn that around and get a $2 million loan in 2018 with the Green Bank, and that helped me bridge the gap and continue to grow substantially. So those were really painful times. I went to bed. I started counting the number of orders I got on the website, how much money I would get, and whether I could pay the bills. So certainly a challenging time back then. Yeah.
So bringing on a strong CFO and then being able to get a large line of credit from Green Bank were ultimately the big ones, but then just along the way, figuring it out with some of the smaller facilities.
Absolutely, yeah.
I want the audience to know, for the record, I've been trying to get Mathias to allow me to invest as an equity investor for at least 5 years. So I think it every pain that he went through, he deserves, just so he knows.
It was certainly painful, but we turned the corner, so we're good now.
I would have been a shark. You wouldn't want me involved in your company. No, I love what you're doing. Hey, Mathias, I like to ask this question as we wrap up the show. I want to know if there's any question that you think people should ask you based on your background and experience, or maybe you kind of wish they wouldn't ask you.
Yeah, I think for me, it's many times I wish more of my team would ask more about what it means to really be an entrepreneur and to start a business. And I think I'm with the hope of, I was joking about this the other day. I was like hoping that everybody that works somewhere would have been able to run their own organization or their own business, at least start one, to see what it takes, because it's just that experience that I think is extremely important, because you need this bi-directional empathy. And sometimes, we as leaders have to have empathy for our employees and our teams. And I think that would maybe create also some empathy the other way around, to say that, look, Mathias, he's really acting in the best interest of Woom. And it's basically maybe because he has experience of having started this organization. And I think that's something that I wish, wish everybody had the chance to, or the opportunity to start their own business and go through those learnings, because it's a great opportunity to learn and grow and understand what it takes to actually run a business.
I love the mindset of trying to create your own entrepreneurs from your company. And Side Hustle Sam is a great chapter in the book that could talk a little bit about.
I do have a couple of Side Hustle Sams as well. And to be frank, I try to support them as much as I can, because I do believe that we know that we can't hold, especially entrepreneurial personalities, we can't hold them forever, because we know they have the drive to do things on their own. So I often make myself available or talk with them and help them and coach them, because I want them to experience that as well, and it could be a great opportunity for them.
Man, that's very, very cool, and a great lesson for other entrepreneurs. Don't dissuade your potential entrepreneurs from doing it, but support them and maybe keep them as an employee as they continue to pursue their career. And sometimes those side hustles, you can become an investor, and we all win. So
that's right.
Hey, Mathias, on that note, we're going to wrap this puppy up. I'd like everybody to please go to YouTube, like and subscribe, and same with anywhere you subscribe or anywhere you get your podcasts. Go check out Unlocking Moves. Mathias Ihlenfeld, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you. Tschüss.
Thank you so much, Kurt. It's been a blast as always.
If you're an entrepreneur and you think you might have outgrown a member of your team, or maybe you've got a mic, as we talked about in Who's Your Mic, check out this quiz at who'syourmic.com/quiz. That's who'syourmic.com/quiz.